All right, hi, Vaughn and Jen here again, Spirit of Health, and we're going to talk about children's nutrition. Now, we have 2 little girls, and so we know a little bit about children's nutrition, but we want to start from birth, and maybe we'll just talk first about the importance of breastfeeding and breast milk, because I actually was not breastfed. Doctors convinced my mom that formula was better. And so, we always look at everything from God's perspective. Do you think from God's perspective, human breast milk is inferior to some man-made chemical formula made by a giant food company? Interesting world we live in. But so what do you want to share about the importance of breastfeeding and breast milk?
Well, I think the first thing that I think of, because maybe it's just my womanly instinct, is there are so many benefits to breastfeeding besides just feeding your child.
Yeah.
The hormones, the connection, the skin to skin. I mean, it's way bigger.
You lose the weight faster, right?
There's so many things. It normalizes not just baby, but it normalizes mama. Mm-hmm. And I just think that's a really important thing that God didn't design it to come from anywhere, but right here. And this, little 6-inch gap between your eye and the breast is important, because that's where baby's getting her first visuals at the earliest age. And that's that connection that just happens early on. So I just want to start there, that I think that there's a lot of things that happen hormonally when you're breastfeeding that are important for just everything to regulate in the system, as well as the uterus returning to its normal size. I mean, there's just so much. There's a symphony of things happening in the body that we just could not even comprehend. And so the important act of just a simple breastfeeding is just so beneficial, not just for baby to get those nutrients that it needs, but also for mama. Now, I just want to ask Vaughn to speak a little bit about colostrum, because it's this substance that's kind of maybe a mystery to some. It comes out kind of like gold, and it's just an interesting dynamic that why do we have something happen prior to the milk coming in? Why is that necessary? Like, why didn't the milk just start, right? So there's got to be something. God doesn't do something for just kind of randomness. He's always got a purpose. So maybe Vaughn, you can speak about that a little bit.
Sure. Yeah, they call it liquid gold, colostrum, the first milk. And what happens, interestingly, is the first few days. It's usually about 3 days or so. But that first few days, what comes out of the mother's breast is the colostrum. And the baby's intestinal tract is actually open, and that colostrum actually goes through the intestinal tract out through the entire body, and that's how the baby gets all of the immunity from mom. Because normally the intestinal tract is closed off, and it wouldn't only allow certain things in and out. But those first few days of life, this is how the baby gets inoculated. Think of what we're doing. We're doing vaccines, man-made chemical injections under the skin, and calling it medicine. God has ways to inoculate the baby. The baby's inoculated at birth when there's a vaginal birth. And the baby's inoculated with the colostrum, with mom's immune system. So God's an intelligent designer. We've circumvented God's design, and we've chosen man's way, which is why we have so many issues today. But that colostrum is so crucial to life for the first few days, and you miss that if you don't breastfeed. So that's really important.
Yeah, so let's go the alternative. So if mom's breastfeeding, baby's getting all those immunoglobulins and all those, great just things that are going to basically lay down the foundation for the baby's immunity. Let's take the opposite. Let's say the mom doesn't breastfeed. There's maybe pressure to do formula, or
she can't,
right? Or there's some kind of unfortunate circumstance. And the baby's first thing that goes in their mouth is formula. Let's talk about formula. Most of these, and I'm going to say most, I don't have a percentage, are made from genetically modified soy. Yep. And we know the dangers of GMO in an adult's body. We are putting genetically modified soy into babies' bodies that are purposely designed to be porous so that that first nutritious food that goes into the body has access to the whole body and sets up their immune system. That's a big difference between colostrum and genetically modified soy, having access to that whole body. And that's kind of scary.
Yeah, it is.
It's really heartbreaking that we're not that we're doing this. And I don't want to keep pinpointing hospitals, but if you go to a hospital, do you think that they're serving non-GMO soy in their NICUs? Most likely not.
Yeah, and that it just destroys the glandular system and causes thyroid issues, and it's hard on the immune system. There's just all kinds of issues with that. And we see our children, they're so compromised today already. They're born compromised, and they're fed these chemical formulas from these food companies with all these synthetic ingredients, and it's just weird. And it's almost like the goal is just to put something in their body that'll keep them in their life, with no focus or concept of nutrition and what's actually best for the mother and child. And that's the sadness of the world we've created in the food companies and the things that they're doing.
Yeah, and I have to say one more thing about this is if you're being pressured to do formula, and especially sometimes I find this happens in a hospital setting because they cannot measure what's coming out of your breast. And so the formula, they can put it in a bottle and they can measure it. And they can say baby has consumed, and they can check off their little box.
Right.
And so
you can't recreate God.
It's really unfortunate, but pumping and giving a bottle is way different than breastfeeding. It's not going to create the hormones as well as breastfeeding to keep your supply going. And so I really encourage moms, I know that pumping can be beneficial in certain situations, but pumping and giving a bottle is not breastfeeding, in my opinion. It's totally different. It doesn't service the baby and the mom the same, doesn't create that skin-to-skin connection, it doesn't elicit all those hormones. And so if you're being pressured because you have to have so many ounces in baby and you're being put on a breast pump, I just really want to encourage you that, really go for it. Try to nurse as much as you can. If you feel like baby's not getting enough, nurse more frequently. There's just a lot more things that you can do than just switching to formula.
And just remember, everything that mom eats has the potential to go to the baby. So nutrition is important, and eating healthy foods and nutritious foods. I do want to talk about this subject of milk and dairy a little bit, because I think it's a big deal. And I believe that we've been advertised to by the American Dairy Association our whole lives that milk does a body good, and almost to the point where it's almost like a cult following, that it's impossible for your child to grow or to thrive if he doesn't somehow get milk in his life. Now, I love logic and I love God's creation, and I always love to say God designed human breast milk for human babies, and cow's milk for cow babies, and goat's milk for goat's babies, and horse milk for horse babies, right? So why don't we drink all these other animals' milk? Why do we drink cow's milk and goat's milk? It's been used as a food for thousands of years. People have consumed raw milk for thousands of years. So this isn't an anti-milk talk, but it's to let you know that it was not designed for your human baby. That's not what God designed cow's milk and goat's milk for. Cow's milk actually turns a 50-pound calf into a 1,000-pound cow in a year. And the problem is that in our culture today, our children are being born weak and compromised. The children are born with congestion issues, digestion issues. They're not processing the milk properly, and we're seeing allergies and eczema and psoriasis and skin conditions and ear infections and reoccurring sicknesses. And it's because we're doing what we've been told through the generations, that you got to give your kid milk and you got to give your kid dairy. And it's just not true. It's not accurate. Breast milk is the best. And then after breast milk, eat food, because God gave us food to eat. We're the only creature that God designed that continues to eat milk after weaning. And in fact, most animals, they get that little baby off of the breast as soon as possible so that it can fend, for itself. And so I do truly believe that God's natural way was that we breastfeed, as long as we can, and then we eat real food. And there are ways to make your own formula, and you can try cow's milk and goat's milk, it's possible your child might do okay with it, but most children today are not, because of the issues we're having from birth. And so we can eat real food as early as 2-3 months. I mean, we often hear 6 months, but feeding our children fruit is going to give them energy, and it's going to give them vitamins and minerals. And if you want to give them heavy-duty nutrition at a young age, you give them avocado and you give them coconut. And these foods have tons of nutrition and healthy fats in it that can help grow a healthy child. And you do not have to, we have it so ingrained in our brain that there's nothing we can do outside of milk or dairy to have healthy children. I just kind of want to dispel that myth that really is not true. Do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, no, I feel like, we kind of learned the hard way with my first daughter. We did a lot of the fermented dairy in our own diets, and especially my diet while I was breastfeeding her. And I was seeing a lot of things happening, just a lot of skin reactions, and it would kind of come and go, so I couldn't really put my finger on it. And then we had a stint where we traveled and I didn't have access to raw milk, and within a few weeks of being consistently off of the milk, and I wasn't doing cheese at that time just because we were on the road and I couldn't find quality milk, so I chose not to eat any dairy products. And it was really like a shocker for me to see my daughter's skin just come alive and how beautiful and vibrant it was off of dairy, off of me being off of dairy. She wasn't even consuming the dairy. So that was a big wake-up call for me. And just anytime I tried to reintroduce it, or if we've been somewhere where they've had a little dairy, or I thought it was okay maybe just to let her try a little raw cheese, we've experimented, and we just see that it keeps coming back to us that she's just not ready for it. Her system is too congested. Unfortunately, my first daughter, she's a product of a lot of the congestion in my own body. I didn't really work on myself in a way that it was, unfortunately, ideal. So we've chosen for our family that we're in that health journey with you, right along with you. We haven't arrived.
We don't have all the answers.
We're still working it out, and so, but we find that we do better when we start to lighten things up, and we see not only us but our kids doing well with that.
And we're speaking from experience, but also just because I see people, I do consultations, and I see the children with all the health issues and the adults with all the health issues, and now my recommendation for anyone who's wanting to restore their health is get off all dairy 100%. I mean, that is like across the board the number one step to anybody getting better, because it's such a heavy, mucus forming, hard to process, hard to digest food, and especially not designed for children. Our children are suffering because of our choices of these heavy foods and these heavy diets that they can't process. And again, it's just because we're doing what we've been told over the years. So the other topic I kind of wanted to mention was feeding children. Oftentimes we start introducing solids at 6 months, and one of the common things we do, or that we're told, or that doctors still say today, is to feed your kids like rice and rice cereals. And we see kids, I see kids that aren't even 1 year old eating crackers and graham crackers and goldfish and all these types of foods, and these aren't things that God designed for us to go in our bodies at that young of an age. And so we really enjoyed introducing foods to our daughters, kind of along the lines of some of the programs that are out there that the Weston A. Price Foundation supports. I feel that we've really started to emphasize more on the fruits and vegetables, and the lean meats and the healthy fats are added in, but they're not as much as the forefront runners, as we feel that the fruits and vegetables bring life and vitality, and we feel that they're cleansing and even bringing our children into a better state of health when we kind of tipped the scale a little bit more heavy with the fruits and vegetables than with the heavy fats and meats. And so
We've been really successful. My daughter's 3, my older daughter, and she eats salads. She's amazing at it.
She's hooked on green smoothies.
She loves green smoothies. I think there's maybe 1 or 2 vegetables that she's not a huge fan of, which that's okay, because she eats like 15 others with no problem.
And we've seen a marked difference in her health.
Yeah, and I really feel, I've talked to a lot of moms, about nutrition, and I really feel that the number one, I feel like, factor in getting your children to eat well is that you have to eat well.
Amen.
You can't have things in your house that are on the top shelf that they see you eat every day and expect them not to eventually want to eat those things.
Yes.
It's just the way it's going to be. They're going to eat, and you're going to be a much saner person if you all eat the same. And so that means curbing your diet, and obviously you can have some whole grains and things in your diet, but and not introduce it to them until it's time. We personally actually didn't introduce grains to our daughter till she was almost 2 years old.
Will you talk to them about grains a little bit? I think that's important.
So grains are complex carbohydrates, and it takes a lot to break them down into the simple sugars to be utilized in the body. And children, unfortunately, don't have the enzymes, the high amounts of the enzymes to break down those complex carbohydrates in a way that is usable for the body.
And if I can just add that the issue with grains and why so many people are going grain-free and gluten-free and dairy-free, our bodies are compromised, they're congested, and they're not processing right. And so what actually is happening is when you consume a grain, the body can't use that for energy or for fuel. That's why people get tired and exhausted a lot of times after they eat grains. They get the crash. And it's because the body has to convert that complex sugar molecule into a simple sugar molecule. And the byproduct of that breaking down creates acid waste. And that acid waste has to be filtered out of the lymph. It has to be filtered through the kidneys, and it's just taxing on the body. And so if your child has, frequent urination, is wetting the bed, is having gut issues, digestive issues, gas, bloating. I mean, the grains, big time, and the dairy as well. These are foods that, again, are not working today. And again, it's not that God didn't design these foods. It's that, A, we have messed up the food supply, and yes, you can make better choices, but B, it's really more our bodies not being able to process and handle them. And so that's why switching to fruits and vegetables and greens and maybe a few nuts and seeds that you soak and some lean quality meats, kind of following the 80-20 rule. I say we're pretty good at that. We're probably 80% fruits and veggies, 20% lean meats, nuts and seeds. And it's working. It's working really well, and I see it working for all kinds of other families and children. It's tough because we all grew up eating bread and pasta and pizza and crackers in the works. But if you really want to have healthy families and healthy children, then you'll do the difficult things to make the changes because it's worth the quality of life and it's worth having healthy children.
Yeah, so for all those reasons Yvonne just said, I really recommend not really introducing the grains until they're in that 18 to 24 months range, and starting slow and starting with some some quinoa and getting into the kind of more ancient seed grains first, and ultimately working your way slowly through the list, because you want to be looking for reactions, skin things, signs of constipation or digestive disorders. So I think that it's important to take it slow with some of the heavier, more complex carbohydrates, and just walk your kids through it slowly, because it's worth setting them up for success.
Yes.
It really is, and there's so many other foods that you can start them with. Fruits and vegetables and sweet potatoes are great. They're I know they tend to be more on the complex carbohydrates, but kids can digest those pretty well when they're steamed. And getting them some of the eggs and egg yolks. We started our daughter off with soft-boiled egg yolks, and there's just so much out there that you can choose from, that you don't feel like you have to give your kids goldfish.
And let me just say, too many kids today, seriously, too many kids today are addicted to starches and carbs. All they'll eat is goldfish and crackers and bread, and that's a problem. I'm sure you realize that that's a problem, but you're going to be in for a battle, and it's better to fight the battle sooner than later, and you need to change their diet, and they need to eat what you are eating as a family. And if they choose not to eat, then they have to eat the next meal. I mean, that's kind of my philosophy, and we've seen that work with a lot of people we work with and kids we work with. But they have a sickness in their body, and they're craving foods that stimulate dopamine, that make them feel almost like a high. They have infections in their body, candida, yeast, fungal overgrowth, and they're driving that craving through eating sugars and carbs. The children have health issues. And if they won't eat anything else, it's a sign of a health issue. And if we don't address it, you're risking your child really getting sick and having debilitating illness. Because, again, the signs and the symptoms are there, and we have to deal with them. You know?
And I think it's best to start dealing with it early on. You know, a lot of parents maybe are afraid that, well, my kid's not eating if I don't let them have their favorite, you know, bread and cheese or whatever. We have seen it over and over. When children are given the option to eat a healthy item and they refuse, and they continue to refuse, they will eat when they're hungry. And I'm not into child starvation by far. But if they need to switch over and we are loving them, we are going to love them more by giving them quality food that is going to heal their body.
Yes.
It is not loving them well to pacify their craving.
Amen.
It's just not.
Amen.
And it's hard to do, and it's hard to work through that stage, but better to do it now than at 16 when they've got a driver's license and they can go down and get McDonald's.
And I think there's a lot of fear, just as couples and women especially, they're the caregivers, they're the life givers, and they want to feed their children, and they want their children to be happy, and they want their children to be fed and nourished. And it's almost like we feel like if we're not giving our kids everything they want whenever we want it, that we're not being loving. And, you know, we have issues with grandparents that just want to give the kids candy all the time because that's how they love the kids. And there's just no understanding. We've lost our understanding of nutrition and how to care for our parents. And I think Jen said it perfectly. You're loving and caring for your children more by limiting them and choosing them and teaching them what's best for their bodies than succumbing to the cravings and the things you know aren't good for them just to appease them or just to make them happy or just to make them comfortable so they're not throwing a fit or a tantrum. I'm telling you, you got to be tough as a parent today, and you got to address those issues because, you know, there's a lot of health issues out there with children, and it's heartbreaking. And we don't want to see anyone go down that road. We want to see you guys choose the life-giving God and the life-giving things of God that can heal and restore our bodies and our children and future generations.
Yeah, and there's ways to make it fun. Get your kids involved in the kitchen. My daughter's 3.
Yes.
We pull a chair up to the counter, and
makes the smoothie.
She actually knows how to run our Vitamix.
Yep.
Kind of scary.
She can make a Vitamix smoothie.
But really, I mean, she loves smoothie time because she gets to put the things in it. And I have found that if I involve her to some level, you know, obviously it's always safe and we keep the knives out of the way. And I find that she is more inclined to eat the food that she gets involved in. And I think that will only grow as she gets older. And so I think that that's really important to get your kids involved in the kitchen. Talk to them about food. Plant a garden with them. Let them grow. My daughter is a tomato freak. And you know why? Because we grew tomatoes. And she would go out with her little bucket and she would pick those little cherry tomatoes. And I think she would sit down.
It took her a while to learn not to eat the green ones. But, you know, she...
But, I mean, really, like, she just loves tomatoes. So it all, you know, was birthed in the garden experience. So get your kids outside, growing a little garden, clipping herbs, any way that they can help you in the kitchen. They feel a part of the food. They feel responsible. They want to eat that food. If they just show up to the table and they haven't done anything, and that food's just landed in front of them, you may have a little bit more of a battle on your hands. But you know, I really think talking to them, finding out their favorite foods, incorporating that in the meal. You know, hey, we've got these options. What can we do? What do you know? And I just think that makes it more fun and it encourages kind of more of that family bonding around food.
And I just want to share, you know, Jen kind of alluded to it, but I just want to reiterate that children are mimickers of their parents.
Yes.
And you know how many children, all they want to do is eat junk. They're addicted to carbs. They think anything green is gross. They think anything healthy is gross. Where do you think they get that from? I'm sorry. It comes from you. Like, so if you make eating healthy foods fun, if you make green foods, like the green smoothie is the coolest smoothie because it's green, kids will get excited about eating green smoothies. They are complete blank slates. And what you teach them, that's what Jen said, is like, you have to be walking the walk. You have to be eating all the same things as a family. You can't keep things from them because they're not healthy. But it's okay for an adult to eat it, but I wouldn't give it to my kid. I mean, what's that all about, you know? And if one child has an issue, you need to change as a whole family. You don't ostracize one child because he's got a gut problem. And I've just seen all these issues happening. We have to come together, and children will mimic what you do. So if you make green smoothies and you make it fun and you make green the fun color, it is not hard to get your child to eat healthy. We've seen it, and we see it with other couples all the time. So that's our heart related to children's nutrition. We thank you for watching, and we hope it helps you to bring up healthier children and healthier future generations. God bless.
Amen.